Welcome to another flip lesson in math. Today we're going to be talking about division, and with division, remainders. And with remainders, remainders as fractions or remainders as decimals. So when we divide, sometimes we have leftovers, which we call remainders. And there's several different strategies for dealing with remainders. We can, let's see, we can put them as fractions. We could also put that remainder as a decimal. We could round up and get rid of the remainder, or we could just ignore the remainder totally. And depending upon what type of problem it is, that's going to help us determine what we want to do with the remainder. Today we're going to talk about two types of remainders, fractions and decimals. So making our remainder a fraction or a decimal. And having a remainder as a fraction is good with things like food, when you're going to divide up, where you could divide up a piece of food, or you could divide up a cookie into a half or into 1/4, or a pizza into 1/8 of a slice or something like that. Dividing a person into a half would not be a good idea. That's kind of messy and it doesn't work out very well. um, Having a remainder as a decimal works out well when maybe it's something like money, or sometimes like measurement. That would be a good idea to keep working with your division until you work it into a decimal. Measurement could also be worked with fractions sometimes. So we're going to look at a couple problems, and as you go through, you want to think about, is this a problem where I could divide it until I get a fraction, or should I keep working until it's a decimal or something else? Our first problem says Mr. Moore has 377 cookies. He wants to share them with Mr. Rockenstein, Mrs. Mullet, and Mrs. Bagley, which we know really never happens, but we'll pretend like I'm sharing. How many cookies will each teacher get? Well, we know our number model is going to be 377 divided by 4 equals x. And so if I were to write that out as 377 divided by 4, and now if we do the actual work, remember our DMSD, we could do 4 goes into 3, 0 times. 4 goes into 37, 9 times. 9 times 4 is 36. Subtract, we get 1. We drop our 7 down. 4 goes into 17 4 times. So 4 times 4 is 16. Subtract, we get 1. And I don't have any other numbers to go. And now we have to think, okay, would it make sense to have this as a fraction? And if it does, which with a cookie it does, we could divide a cookie into fractions so that each person gets an equal share. So we're going to take the remainder we have and we're going to put that as the numerator, or the top of a fraction. And then our divisor is going to always be the denominator. And so we just use our remainder goes to the top, the divisor goes to the bottom, and we have a fraction. So my answer now is 94 and 1/4. So it says how many cookies will each teacher get? Well, each teacher would get 94 and 1/4 of a cookie, because we could, if I had a picture of a cookie, we could divide a cookie into fourths. And so each teacher gets 1/4. I get the biggest fourth. So we wouldn't need to do that as a decimal or to continue work or want to ignore it. We want to make sure there's no leftovers, no cookies sitting around, so we keep working. Another example, and this one kind of goes with doing a decimal, would be some money. And so if we read the problem, after the fundraiser, 4 students pulled all their money together to split it evenly. They raised $195 total. How much money would each student get to donate for the fundraiser? Now, when we're dealing with money, you don't want to leave money laying around. So we're always going to use all of the money. You wouldn't just leave it somewhere. You're going to make sure everybody gets their money. And so again, if we set up our problem, we have 195 divided by 4. And since we know we're dealing with money, you can't get like a fraction of a quarter. So it wouldn't be like 1/4 of a dollar or something like that. We would work it out into a decimal, because again, we don't want to ignore it either. So now if we work our problem, when we get to that point, we'll continue on. 4 goes into 1 0 times. 4 goes into 19 4 times. And 4 times 4 is 16. Remember, I'm doing my DMSD. does McDonald's serve donuts, or divide, multiply, subtract, and drop. So I'm at my subtract point. 19 minus 16 is 3. Drop my 5 down. 4 goes into 35 8 times. 8 times 4 is 32. Subtract, and I get 3. And now we said we don't want to make it a fraction because I don't want to have to figure out what 3/4 of a dollar is. So we'll continue working it so we get an exact number. So I add my decimals, and now I'm going to put a 0 to drop down. So if I drop my 0 down, 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract, I get 2. So I need to add another 0 and drop it down. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. I subtract, I get 0. So now that I'm at 0, I've done my decimal. So I've gone until my remainder is a decimal. So that leaves me 48.75. Or in this case, that means each person or each student gets $48.75. And so you can see it makes sense to go with a decimal in this case because it's money. And so it gives us that remainder. Just a little bit of a review. Fractions and decimals as remainders. There's good situations to make it a fraction when you can divide that object up. So if you're dividing a pizza, dividing a cookie, dividing groups of things, you can do that. If you can't divide it, if you can't really cut it up, but you need to come to a final conclusion and we need to use it, we can't get rid of it, we would do a divide until we get a decimal. So I have one more problem. I want you to look at this one, and I want you to decide if it makes more sense to have a fraction remainder or to have a decimal remainder. And I'm going to give you 10 seconds after I'm done reading. I'm going to set the dynamite on fire, and I want you to decide. So the problem is, after Halloween, 6 students pooled all their candy. They figured out they had 249 pieces altogether. How many pieces of candy would each student get? And so the dynamite has been lit. You now have 8, 7 to decide. Should this be a fraction or a decimal? What would you figure out? All right, you just exploded the dynamite. I hope you came to the conclusion that you should probably do a decimal with this one. So you don't have to figure this problem out, but if we were to do that, we would end up with you would end up with a fraction as a remainder here, not a decimal. You would end up with a fraction. So now you're going to work on some worksheets and practice deciding if it's going to be a fraction or a decimal remainder.